All right. First things first, I just want to call out that there is a document for the agenda. If you are not signed in for this meeting, it'd be great. Cool. First standing item is start the recording. That's started. Let's go over outstanding RSCs. Give me 1 minute. I'll actually share my screen. 1 second here. Oh, that's was so close to being what I wanted. There we go. Awesome. So first off, we have this dependency library RSC from Marty that was put in yesterday. Is there somebody who is willing to speak to this? I don't see Marty here, so someone else from the Cordeps team.
Marty's out today. I can speak a little bit to this. Could you look on the readable just to refresh my
Yes,
memory?
I can.
Okay, yeah. So we have this thing, the dependency server, which is what we use to kind of make available all the dependencies and their versions and metadata and whatnot. So this is a library that we want to extract from that so that can be used in other places. So the idea is that for any dependency we support, this will be a Go library that will have a public method for getting all the versions and also getting a specific version. And this just kind of lets us, we have this library in a private repo somewhere. This just kind of lets us use that in more public places and expose it to people who are also interested in using this kind of thing. Any questions on that?
Y'all thought about writing a CLI as well?
We have not thought about that, but this would enable us to.
Could be interesting. I do like the idea of also having the exposed library. Sort of allows people to set up custom tooling and whatnot.
Saw a question in the chat about non-Go languages. So the library itself is written in Go. It supports lots of languages that aren't Go, but we haven't considered writing more libraries that aren't in Go, since we write everything in Go currently.
I was just working on a node Buildpack and combining Go and the Node.js ecosystem was kind of tricky.
I think as well though that there is a standardized like structure for this as well. So like there's like a JSON. Like is that part like a standardized JSON structure, Mark? I can't recall.
I don't think there's standardized structure for what the depth server returns, which is a different RC we talked about. For this thing, it would be a Go struct. We haven't put as part of the RC what the struct would look like.
Right. I wonder if there's there might be a way to like have a universal hookup to like from like a server send out to structure. I feel like I've seen something like that recently, but I can't remember now. Anyway, is that all? Are there any more questions about this RFC?
I guess it's less about making this public, the library, but it's more about the publicness of the depth server itself. For the Java Buildpacks, we generally like download things. We don't rehost them somewhere. We download things from their original source, even in the Buildpack. And like part of that is around redistribution and like licensing requirements. But it seems like, I'm assuming that you guys have vetted that this is kosher.
So I don't think the plan is to host the dependencies themselves on a server. This is more around metadata.
Oh, okay.
Like we're not hosting like external source code anywhere, like upstream source code.
So you reach out to the depth server for the depth metadata, and then from there go fetch the depth. That makes more sense to me. Thanks,
yeah,
guys.
That's right.
Yeah, and we are hosting the stuff in S3, but we've been doing that since Buildpacks existed, so that's not any different. It's just the metadata.
That's only open source stuff that is okay to build binaries out of and redistribute, like Node.js, Ruby, things like that.
Cool. Any other questions on this? No? All right. Let's take a look at another one of these. Propose Go HTTP function build pack. Matt Moore. Pull this up.
Hi, everyone. So just to preface, I'm new to this process, so be gentle. So I can give some sort of background and oh,
Sorry, I'm gonna
what
try
about
and
the
pull it
little,
up.
like, the little render button in GitHub reviews?
Is there a render button?
Yeah. So right next to viewed, if you click on the little like file icon, no, other side, left. There you go.
I'm a chump. I've been clicking around on files for a while now.
It shows which parts have changed too. You can see the bars there. So
yeah, awesome.
If this wasn't a totally new doc, it would be more useful for that.
Yeah. So okay. So background. So I spend my day-to-day in Knative land, and doing sort of serverless container stuff on Kubernetes. Obviously, y'all are producing containers, but a lot of folks think about functions when they and writing higher level sort of entry points for their programs when they think serverless, right? And a whole bunch of folks have been, Riff has been doing this forever, but Google has started to curate build packs for this. Red Hat has started to curate build packs for this. And so basically the idea was to try and start chipping away at, not sort of boiling the ocean in terms of creating, a whole function framework for arbitrary signatures and stuff like that. But starting with sort of the simplest signature that everyone seems to be doing, and in this case, in the context of Go, and seeing if we could sort of start to plumb through as sort of a canary going into the coal mine, so to speak, what it would look like to do, have a function build pack that sort of contributed the wrapping around functions with a particular signature that could optionally participate in sort of standard build pack, orders, I guess. I'm sorry, I've been ramping up on my terminology, so I may completely sort of butcher it, but yeah. So basically, what we've been experimenting with is there's a couple that we've been playing with. This one is just HTTP functions, which I think it would be interesting to try and get into eventually, and I'd like to understand sort of the considerations and processes here into sort of the standard Go build pack order as an optional participant, where it can, if you are doing function stuff, wrap that in, the standard HTTP server scaffolding that you might want. There's another one that we've been experimenting with around cloud events that we think would be interesting to try and get into probably to live alongside the cloud event SDKs under CNCF and the serverless working group. But this actually is part of discussing that, the idea of having something slightly lower level as a starting point came up, and this seemed like something to potentially pursue in the even shorter term. So yeah, so that's some of the background, and there's a what should be a fully functional sort of prototype that we've been trying to make use some of the Paketo libraries and stuff like that. So hopefully it's not completely foreign if you click over to that repo and poke around. But the basic idea is that all you end up writing is a little HTTP handler function, and all of the sort of scaffolding around that would be generated for you. So I'm going to stop talking.
I'll be the first to admit that I'm out of my depth when it comes to Lambda function type work, but this looks pretty interesting. Anyone have any questions right off the bat? Awesome.
Generally, for this type of concern, like generating or wrapping some existing application source code with like function stuff, so that just trying to get a better understanding of like the general problem you end up solving. This is like detect that the user wants to do this, and then you're generating some extra code that sits alongside their application source code, and then the regular build process just kind of executes beyond that. Is that right?
Yeah, so so effectively what this is doing, is exactly that. It does basically in the detect phase, it tries to figure out whether or not it's the sort of shape of, Go thing that might want that scaffolding generated. And then as part of the plan, it passes through to the build phase, sort of what function in what package the user might want wrapped, and generates, a Go style package main that wraps that and then directs the later Go build phase that it composes with to build that target as part of the sort of normal order. And if so the context we've been experimenting with this in, basically what we did was we took the Paketo Go order that has like Go mod disk, Go mod vendor, Go build. I may be forgetting one, but basically we inserted this as an optional step, I think before Go mod vendor. And so basically when there's a function that matches, it participates. And if there isn't a function that matches, it doesn't participate. So you can effectively inject it into the existing order. And when the user wants to do higher level function stuff, it kicks in. And when they aren't, it sort of gracefully bows out and doesn't do it. And you get your normal sort of app flow. And part of the reason that we've been looking at doing it that way is so that we can sort of reduce the scope of what the sort of function Buildpack needs to do to very focused signatures. So this is just dealing with HTTP. If we stick with this sort of detecting the signature model, I think the idea is that rather than like teaching this about cloud events or like more complex input and output objects, we would just have another optional build pack that could participate that handled cloud events. And then depending on the signatures you're matching, the appropriate ones would kick in and do their thing. And the others would just, not participate. And so the cloud event prototype, which, is also sort of in this style, but supports a different set of signatures. We basically prototyped linking both of these into an order, and depending on the signature, one participates or the other participates or neither participates. So does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, generalizing this a bit more, across all the different types of languages that you would want to target. So like if you're doing node functions or Java functions, like does that pattern of like having a build pack that arguably generates some sort of functional entry point, is that like generally the pattern that you would see across all those types of function build packs?
So it's a good question. I think one of the things that Evan's poking at now, I've poked at this a little bit, is basically, especially in the context of dynamic languages, your ability to sort of reason about sort of the state of the function that you might be wrapping ahead of time, sort of statically, especially without things like type information, is pretty hard. And so, one of the things that's this build pack does for Go is allows you to, there's certain defaults, and it tries to detect, whether the default like package name and function name match the signature, but it lets you sort of override it. I think without something like TypeScript, it might be hard to sort of reliably do that kind of detection. And so, you know, it's also entirely possible that this model won't necessarily translate to all languages in all contexts. But you know, it's sort of the vein we're exploring. And you know, I am not a Node or a Python expert, so if there are folks who are interested in poking at this, who you know are an expert in one of these other domains, I think we'd be really interested in talking and collaborating on what it might look like as we go to other languages. But you know, this is sort of the our first attempt. So you know, very happy to discuss, but you know.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see architecturally how those different types of things would fit into the kind of ecosystem of Buildpacks more generally. And I myself am also like much more familiar with Go, and like the stuff you're writing in Go, I'm like, oh yes, that seems pretty obvious the way that this works and functions. And there are just kind of some open questions for other languages. So I'm just trying to get an understanding so that we can think a little bit further into the future about how we could support that more generally across the set of languages we have.
So I can tell you what I've found from Node. If you're not using TypeScript, it's pretty sketchy. Because the difference between, hey, I take an event and I return an event, and hey, I get an HTTP request and I return an HTTP response, those probably have the same number of arguments, which is all the information that the Node introspection, JavaScript introspection APIs will give you, except that you can also get the text of the function. And apparently people will parse this and look at the names of the arguments, because that's all you've got.
On Riff, we did the more naive set an environment variable to true, and then it will
we could certainly
go and use the
that.
function. Yeah, I wonder if there's some danger of people just accidentally making signatures that match these things, right? So you'd probably want a way to turn it off anyways.
Yeah. Also, if we match more than one signature, I think we bail out because we don't know which one to select unless an environment variable set.
Yeah.
Really specific question about Go. When you're thinking about turning the app into a, or you know, turning the function that the user provides into something that's runnable, are you thinking about injecting that main function in a separate layer that then imports the user code? Are you modifying the application directory? You know, like I see you have some code there. I'm just curious what approach you took.
It is super naive and dumb. So I think Di Pertasso mentioned, you know, potentially doing something with like Go plugins or something like that to try and, you know, think about how you might do the layering magic. This is not doing any layering magic. It is not that clever. It is literally just generating a new package main in a separate subdirectory within the source tree, and then basically saying, hey, BP Go targets to the subsequent build step, so that it knows to build that target.
I wasn't thinking about fancy layer magic at runtime, because like the plugin system is kind of crap anyways, right? But at build time, there's still a concept of a build layer. So you could create a build, like a self-contained build layer that has that executable source code in it and still import something from the app directory. It wouldn't help with the efficiency. It would just be a little kind of a cleaner organization, so you wouldn't have to modify the app directory each time, and you could cache the source code that you installed there, you know, like through a build time cache. I don't think it's necessarily maybe complexity for no reason, right? But I was just curious what approach you took to that code generation and importing step at build. But you know,
yeah,
probably doesn't matter too much.
This is exactly the sort of stuff that we would love for you all, the experts, to beat us up on, because I understood some of the words you just said, but like, you know, we were mostly sort of poking at, you know, things and like, oh, this works, oh, this doesn't work, and, you know, iterating and figuring out how some of this stuff works, and pleading for help on Slack. So yeah, I mean, right now, yeah, it may be super dumb, and we can, certainly make it smarter as we learn some of these tricks. And part of that is part of sort of canarying this something sort of super small, to learn a lot of those things before we go and like do this a whole bunch of places, right? Yeah.
Definitely not super dumb. I was just curious if you did anything fancy there.
Yeah, no, it is zero fancy. So
A specific question about the implementation. In your order grouping, you have go dist, and then you have your functions build packs, and then you have the remainder of the order grouping. Is there a reason that go dist appears before the function build packs?
That's a great question. It's because I didn't know what an order was when I first started poking at that. And I was like, hey, it might introduce things that might need to get vendored. I don't know that we are, but
if there's no dependency here, what I'm getting at is if there's no dependency in the function build packs on go dist itself, then you could move the function build packs all the way to the top. And then once you've done that, they're kind of at the boundaries of what any of the order groupings were. You could actually build a wrapper build pack that wraps the go build pack. So you basically could just have a build pack yourself that's just like functions. And in that you would have your two function build packs and then just go after that.
That sounds
by itself. And then we kind of externalized functions away from the Go build packs. It would be a way for us to kind of bootstrap and build, say, in the community, kind of a functions build pack that people could kind of play with as a sandbox for trying out functions before we figured out really how is all this going to work when we say promote it all the way to the Paketo build packs proper.
Sure. Sorry, I can't see who's talking, but I think that's something that's interesting that we should talk more about. If there are pointers and stuff you can point us at, that seems like something that we should poke at a bunch, because I think it's a really good way of avoiding sort of, okay, we've been playing with this here and stepping off the cliff of including it into, the great big thing and, risking breaking things. So yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, I'd like for us to be able to get feedback about this and have people be able to try it without us promoting it all the way to like, now this is, properly maintained and supported by Paketo and like everything that goes along with that.
Yeah, that sounds great. Is that Ryan?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can.
Yeah, I was looking through the little thing trying to see who was talking. Okay, great.
I'm gonna call time on this RFC because we got I think 2 more to get through and some other agenda items. So I think everyone should go give it a read. It sounds really cool. All right, I think we just have 2 more RFCs to get through. Docker Hub distribution, Ryan. This has been approved by Ben. Is there any follow-up that needs to happen with this other than Stephen?
Yes, Stephen said something last time we discussed this when Stephen was here. Stephen said something to the effect of, we may or may not be covered by the Cloud Foundry Foundation's existing approval of the Docker Hub open source project loophole for this particular concern around like poll rate limiting. I was kind of waiting for Stephen to figure out if that was true or not.
So the the rate limiting is only on the client side. So like it's like you're subject to the rate limiting for pulling any kind of public image. If you have if you're not logged in, or if you're logged in and you're not paying, right? The retention was the only question. And they put the retention way off. They've said like they're not going to think about that for another 6 months or something. And the Cloud Foundry Foundation has said that once they have their open source, or they've talked to Docker, they should launch their thing for open source projects that gets rid of the retention limits before they apply those through. So I wouldn't worry about it at all. I would say we're good to go to switch everything over. Much cheaper than GCR.
Okay, then it's just waiting on Stephen's approval.
Cool.
Cool.
And the last piece is this proposal to create a Paketo project programming style guide. Frankie is not here. It looks like Ryan, you put in some notes. Frankie's out this week, so
Yeah, there just looks like there maybe are some like points where Frankie said something or left a note to herself that they were going to put in some more details. So it seems like maybe it's not ready yet.
cool. I think with that, we're actually through all of the RFCs in the high-level Paketo RFCs repo. So we can, I'll stop sharing my screen and we can get into the rest of the agenda items. Let's see, hold on, I'm trying to load up this. So the next agenda item is node-application build plan entry.
This was one I put. I'm going to follow up with an RFC, but I just wanted to throw this idea out there first. Been working on some APM build packs, and one of the problems we've been having when we have a build pack that can integrate with applications in many different languages is some of the build packs that contribute like a start command, like npm start, don't add anything to the build plan that would let another build pack know that there was going to be like a node application at runtime, for example. I was wondering what you all thought about having build packs that create start commands, both provide and require something so that you know that there would be application of that language existing at runtime.
I think one of the reasons we hadn't done it up to that point is because we couldn't think of a use case where someone would want to require the end product. But if there is one, I think it's more than reasonable for us to add a hook in the build plan entry.
The reason we want to do it is so we can install like a profiling agent or something that would run with the application at runtime. But right now we don't have a way of knowing whether Node was used just as part of the build process or whether there really is an application to profile later.
So this is like the APMs themselves are like, they say that they require node application or something like that. And then your expectation would be that like npm start, yarn start, node start all provide that. And
yeah, like npm start could provide and require node application. And then one of these agent build packs would provide an agent and provide a node agent and require a node application. Then also provide a Java agent and require Java application. So whatever type of application you end up with, you get the right agent.
that seems reasonable. Would you mind opening issues, Emily?
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question. Like, should I create language-specific RFCs, a project-wide RFC? Would we rather just have issues? Are we okay with that?
That's a good question. I'd say, go ahead, Ryan.
I just was going to ask, what are the languages that you're currently targeting that you would need support for?
Right now, it's mostly just Node,
Okay.
but I feel like it wouldn't hurt to roll this pattern out everywhere. Because as a convention,
I don't know, Tim, Arjun, what do y'all think?
If it's only Node, I think a language-specific RFC would be great.
And would that be, that could be just against the Node.js repo as like a whole, so you don't necessarily have to go to each like nodes, npm start, node start, whatever.
Yes,
just
the meta Buildpack has an RFC directory.
Yeah.
Part of me feels like if we're going to do it for Node, and we already do this for Java, it wouldn't hurt as a convention to always put this in the build plan. Like, there's not a huge downside to it. And then it's predictable in a way that when people want to build integrations, we don't have to come back and add it in later.
So some of these we already like indicate that we have an application that we're sending around. I think like with .NET, we let the user know that we're publishing something like that's like a dependency that we have. I think that Go build is in kind of an interesting state because it is actually like a self-contained build, right? Start command setup. So maybe that would drive out something bigger in the Go build pack, but I don't know.
I would say I'm happy with either, Emily. If you want to write like a project-wide RFC that covers multiple languages and you just kind of generalize the pattern, that's fine with me. If you want to write one that's node specific, have at it.
Cool. All right, thanks, guys.
Awesome. And finally, I realized I did actually miss a standing item for language-specific RFCs, but I did want to get to these agenda items. Plans for Buildpack Registry.
This one was me. Just a quick question that came up. I was playing around with the Buildpack registry today. I noticed that some of the Java stuff is already on there. I'm wondering if we're planning on getting the non-Java stuff on there. Forrest or Steven, I vaguely remember one of you talked to the CNB folks about this, but I forget.
I think the registry is ready. If you want to publish the non-Java stuff, go for it. It's still kind of being developed, but it'd be great to start it off with as many build packs as we can.
Are commands to push to the registry baked into 0.15.0?
I forget when they landed back, but sorry, go ahead.
I was just looking at it right now. There's like this experimental commands thing, so you could just like register the build pack.
Does that need to be done for every publish that we make? Like for every push to a GCR, do we need to also publish to the registry? I'm just a little unfamiliar on what the deal is.
Anytime you release a new build pack version, you have to tell the registry, hey, there's a new version.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we can look into that.
Cool. I can take an action and get some issues filed.
Cool. All right. I think that brings us to the end of the agenda. But there are these language-specific RFCs, which I just saw. So 1 second. Let me share my screen again. Please. Thank you. We actually have a couple that have been closed recently. Let's see.
On the left-hand side under states, if you click on open, it'll only show you the open ones.
Thank you. I was looking for that. Okay, so we just have 3 different migrations from Buildpack YAML to environment variables. We have the Go Build one here. I don't know that there's been any comments on this that require action. I think that this is just ready to merge, Ryan. So whenever you feel that it's good to go, you can squash and merge it. .NET Core, this is in a similar boat. I think that all that needs to happen is that Josh, you need to take a pass at this and approve it.
Yeah, did say.
Cool. And then finally, Node.js, which I think this one has had the most recent activity. There's still some open discussions around this entry point idea. Does anyone want to talk about this?
Yeah, the BP entry point is listed in the Node.js RFC, but if people think that this could be useful, this could also be like in a top level RFC. Yeah, but that doesn't prevent us from like merging this RFC anyway.
What advantage do we get from BP entry point for the Node.js RFC in particular?
That is like for Buildpacks like Node Start. They currently only look for like a main, I think it's a server.js, and then we have works which will look for like a 3 or 4 or 5 of like index.js and that kind of very popular ones. But with this, they can, point to whatever custom ones they want.
Okay, so it's a detection criteria at that point. Like you're pointing out the so at that point it's like almost like a node project path for that. Like we're able to point out where the node file that we actually want to use is.
No, there is a distinction between the project path and because this one is just used to set the start command, like where this is purely launch time.
And why wouldn't you be able to accomplish the same thing with like proc file?
I think with the proc file, it won't be detected, I believe.
There's definitely a common case of folks building an image and say having like, first.js, second.js, third.js, all baked into the same image, but then at runtime running them as 3 separate containers. One that maybe is like a background worker, one that's your app serving HTTP requests, and one that's like, I don't know, some sort of status monitoring metrics thing. And if you did that, what would like your proc file, like if you introduce some other complexity, people like folks have said things like they want to be able to, through an environment variable, specify which app ends up running.
Okay, I see.
I think there's kind of 2 things here though going on at the same time. One is what are the target directories we should build, right, that go into the image, and which of these target directories is the one that needs to execute at runtime, right? So like in the Go example, you might actually want to build 3 binaries in the image. The app may use all 3 binaries, but this one is the one that goes into the start process. And so having a generic entry point for those types of things, or like having generic interfaces for both what to build and what to run seem important, but I feel like one's kind of a list and the other's kind of a single environment variable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that would be interesting because I think it would also change some of the Go logic that we have currently. Like Go, we kind of just say the first app that's in the order is the one that we're going to run, unless you override that with a proc file. So I guess my question is like, obviously this BP node project path is to like point out like this is the file that I actually like. If it's nested somewhere, like I have like I don't know, maybe some sort of like Django app or something like that, where I have my front end all contained in some sort of subfolder. Is that the idea?
Yeah, the project path would be like the working directory.
Okay, I see. And then
it'll be very similar to the BP Go, whatever we have in the Go ecosystem.
yeah. Sorry, I'm just thinking about this. Okay. Yeah, I need to go through. But it also sounds like another thing that potentially spawn out of this is like BP entry point in general might be a more useful idea to have
Yeah,
across
the
like
latest version of that RFC is the diff you see is outdated. It is renamed to BP underscore entry point.
Okay. And so in that case, then the discussion is like, for obviously it just pertains to this RSC, but maybe to expand this to like Go as well. So when you do a multi-target Go build, you could also have a BP entry point where you could pick the Go target and it's not dependent on the positioning. Yeah, sure. All right, cool.
I do have I worry that it might be confusing to use the word entry point here when what is passed in does not end up in the container entry point. I wonder if there's another term for this. Because I think as a Buildpack user, if I wasn't as familiar with the spec setting this, I would assume it would end up in my container entry point and then look for it there.
Sure. I think that's something that we could think about. If you have any ideas, Emily, feel free. You can pop over and comment on this.
Yeah, I feel like I need to. Apologies, I haven't read through this to
No, it's
better
fine.
understand exactly what this is doing. Because I'm wondering also how it intersects with like the default process type, which is already something a user can set, right? If Buildpacks are providing multiple process types, a user can choose which one becomes the default.
Sure. So this is more. The Go Buildpack is what I'm more familiar with, so I can give you a better example. We allow the user to set a list of targets to be built, and we will run a build process for each one of those targets, essentially producing n number of binaries. The way that it currently stands is that the order of the list that you hand us, the first binary that we build is the one that we end up running, like as our entry point. So we do / that binary. What this would allow us to do in the Go case is basically say, here's a list of all of the binaries we want to build, and then here's the actual like the start command that we want to run. Like here's the point of entry that we want to run.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, but slightly different from how you do it with a proc file because it's more.
Yeah, because the proc file. Well, the proc file. The problem with that is it's baked into source control, right? So it's hard to do a bunch of independent, like say, because like you would want 3 different containers at that point. Each all have the same binaries on it. Maybe some of them are slightly interdependent or something like that. But at the end of the day, they're all in the same app, and you want the 3 different containers to do 3 different things. So you run 3 builds, and it would be better if you didn't have to change, like rewrite your proc file in between each one of those builds. You could just change which entry point that you're passing it to it. Is that the general idea?
I mean, you could have a proc file that had 3 different processes in it and then choose which one you launch at launch time, right?
You could do that too, yeah.
Yeah, we've already seen instances though where folks don't own the code that they're trying to build, so putting a proc file into the source code isn't really an option. So
Yeah,
instead they want to just say like, hey, the node file I'm trying to run is called like, you know, myapp.js, and like just specify that as an environment variable.
That makes sense to me, but maybe we just call it like start command or something, or process, or we'll think about it. I'm just worried that entry point is very specific.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Are there any other questions about this? If y'all have any other sort of desires to take a look, it's yeah, you guys can take a look. Feel free to review it. All right. With that, are there any other topics that people would like to discuss in this week in group meeting? Cool. All right. Let's call it. See y'all.